So tell me, Professor Chavez, what are some of your general thoughts, both of, what the readings were, but also how you felt the students responded? Because, my guess is when our lovely students see this, they would want to kind of hear from us some reflections on how they internalize what they read and listen to. And I understand that for some of them, some of the material was a little heavy. So it probably would help for us to give it some context or some support, if I could call it that. So I don't know, did you have general thoughts based on what you read?
Yeah. Okay. So that helps. Having a guiding point helps. Yeah. So I some folks mentioned and noticed that the readings were kind of all over the place. And yes, they are all over the place. I wanted, part of the intention for the first week was to showcase the types of material that we're going to be seeing, right? So we saw a video, we saw a tweet, we saw we saw an academic article that was on the shorter side and not too dense. And then we saw a longer academic paper that was super dense. And I think just having an idea and a feel for, the different types of material and how to engage with different types of material, and also trying to stay away from the idea of you can only gain knowledge through really intense academic readings, which I feel, folks who are STEM majors, we have a lot of STEM majors, will know, a lot of it is more like lecture and doing labs and focusing on the very quantitative stuff. And then if folks have experience outside of STEM majors, a lot of it is much more read these dense academic papers and do these really in-depth deep dives into them, which can be really overwhelming. So I wanted to showcase a little bit of the different things there. And it looks like a lot of folks really like the Brene Brown video, which I appreciated because it's definitely one of my favorite videos. And ever since I watched it a couple years ago, I've shared it with everyone I know. And it like someone said, oh, getting connection unstable. Okay. Am I still coming through?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit, but you're here now.
Okay. So yeah, so I think it does bring up a lot of really interesting conversations with folks. And yeah, so not a lot of people commented on really any of the other readings besides the video, which is fine. Or we also saw a tweet, I forgot that. But yeah, and thinking about critical race theory, it feels like a big scary thing, and when you read a long dense paper on it, it seems almost even more unattainable. But I think the bigger goal there in terms of what you should have gotten from the idea there is the shift in centering like white middle class as the norm, right? So when we think about, well, the average, whatever we want to say, what is it that we mean? Are we centering the majority? And if we are, how does that negatively impact those who are not the majority? Those are some preliminary thoughts.
So tell me, so because this class is called Being Human in STEM, and I assume our 12 wonderful students, when they clicked register on this class, they understood, at least in principle, that thematically we're going to talk about what it means to be human in STEM. In what ways do you think that these readings and tweets and video help introduce that as a philosophy, this idea of being human in STEM?
I think so there are multiple ways to address or answer that question. I think on the one hand, getting an idea of language is important. So, for example, in the tweet, right? That's super short. And just to remind folks of what that tweet is once it loads up. You know, instead of talking about diversifying the field, I prefer to talk about amplifying marginalized voices. And so there has been a shift in calling folks who are from underrepresented racial groups, you know, underrepresented minorities, to specifying that they are from marginalized groups or from underrepresented racial groups or ethnic groups. And so part of it is getting accustomed to the language that we're going to be seeing throughout the readings, understanding that language is you know, always evolving and constantly changing. And for example, this transition to saying folks and students from underrepresented racial and ethnic backgrounds is very new. I mean, code.org, for example, just released a statement talking about how they're changing all of their language around that. So, you know, one aspect of it is that. The other, you know, when we think about empathy and sympathy, when we read the experiences of folks of marginalized identities in the field, we got to do it not just with an open mind, but with an open heart, which is even more important. Because if for folks who don't hold any marginalized identities, it might be easy to say, well, I've never experienced that. Maybe that's just a one-off case, but it's not, right? And so having that open heart and understanding, you know, even if you were to live through the same experience and not feel the same way about it, that doesn't mean that the other people didn't feel some negative type of way about it. And we have to come into these conversations with open minds and open hearts. And similarly, when we engage with each other, we have to be conscientious of the fact that we're all coming from such different backgrounds, not just in terms of where we're from, right? We've got people from Mass, we've got people from Rhode Island. I think we have someone from Pennsylvania, but we also have different majors, different experiences, all kinds of different identities. And so when we engage in this discourse, you know, we're all coming from a place of or we should be coming from a place of love and wanting to learn more, which it seems like everyone wants to do. Everyone talked about being excited to learn more about these topics, which is really great.
Yeah, I mean, that was great. And you know, what I'm hoping we can do, you know, in this sort of weekly conversation is explicitly tie, you know, what people read and listen to and what we hope they get from it back to this whole idea of what being human in STEM means, right? And there's a, I have a 3-year-old, sorry. This idea, you know, it kind of comes, the background of this is that there is an actual history and philosophy of being a scientist where it was intentionally divorced from any kind of emotional aspect, any idea that the practice of science had anything to do with social issues. And in fact, that was the pride of it, right? The pride of it that it was just about data, and the data spoke for itself. And, you know, the consequences of that, you know, have been unfortunate, right? So everything from the Tuskegee study to eugenics, I mean, we can just point to scenario after scenario where once you have human beings engaging in the practice, right, you are a human in STEM, and all of the things that you bring to bear from your social experience in the United States or internationally will impact your practice. And you know what I hope this course does, and you know, at least introduces, is as you start thinking about the human experience in STEM, you start thinking about what it means in terms of power and power structures, right? So this is the whole basis of critical race theory, where race intersects with who holds or who doesn't hold power. And this collection of readings that Professor Chavez you know, left for you was kind of really about thinking about that relationship from different angles, right? So one, the academic, the research lens, one, you know, how we kind of negotiate with each other every day on social media. And it seems like, from what I've read, it seems like all of you all kind of got that. And I'm really excited about the willingness to hear and learn more. I understand that the academic article in particular, you know, will probably need to assist you in kind of walking through that type of discussion, but that's fine. That's, That's why I pay tuition, right? Um, but we hope in terms of the philosophy we hope to introduce in this class, I hope that that's what you saw. And so gonna be a wild ride, and I think one person responded, if I remember, saying, it's kind of good to be open to things they hadn't known in the past. And I could say to you that Professor Chavez and I talked to professors and colleagues about these things, and they're hearing it for the first time. Okay, so believe you me, you kind of have a head start, unfortunately. We wish this was standard, curriculum for everybody, but it's not the case. So we're excited to start this kind of class, with the 12 of you, and I think there'll be much more exciting things to read and talk about as the weeks come by.
Yeah, absolutely. I think someone mentioned that, taking a course like this should be required. And I got very excited because yes. I think that when I took a course like this in my undergrad, it was so eye-opening. And it was, as a lot of you mentioned, it was refreshing to be able to take a STEM course that wasn't just about numbers and data and scientific findings, which of course they're important. And for those of us who are scientists, who are engineers, for those of us who are scientists and are engineers, we're in this because we love it, but there's so much more to that. And it's, a huge aspect of this, like Dr. Dewsbury said, is about what it means to be a human in STEM. But that also entails thinking about how our research, our advancements, our technologies affect other human beings, right? We are not, even if we work in silos, even if we think that our research is just for academic purposes, it's not. It has much broader impacts. And if we forget about the fact that the things that we do in the lab, in the classroom, in the office, that at the end of the day, they're affecting real human beings and real human beings all around the country and all around the world, then we're that much more likely to accidentally cause harm. And so we have to remember that, and we have to remember that the people that it's going to affect, it's probably going to affect more people that don't look like us than people who do look like us, right? If we think about who the majority is in terms of at a global scale, as large as the US is and as powerful as it is, it's not the majority. There are many more folks of different races, different ethnicities, and different socioeconomic status, and that is a huge role, or that has a huge role in how these STEM advancements affect people. And so that's something also that we need to keep in mind.
Let me ask you one question, perhaps we could, each answer this as a closing comment. And I'm asking this because I want to make sure that our students understand that we are not just trying to kind of come and be didactic and just kind of tell them stuff and have them read stuff and tell them stuff. Want to sort of position ourselves in the work that we do, and why these topic matter to us, and how those topics and philosophies reflect themselves in our daily practice. So I just wondering if you can speak a little bit to the concept of being human in STEM or empathy or any of those things right now, and how you incorporate those principles, whether it's your teaching, whether it's faculty development, or any other kind of work you do in the professional space.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love that. You're really good at asking questions. I aspire to be as good at asking questions as you are. But yeah, I mean, so I have had a lot of really great people. What was that? You cut out for a second.
I said you might kick me out of the Zoom chat if I ask too many questions.
But yeah, so I have had a lot of great people along the way remind me of this. And unfortunately, the folks who have reminded me of this have never been the folks who have been in computer science. They were always the people who were in education.
Mhm.
But it's so important to remember that, you know, as for me, as an instructor, to remember that my students are human beings, and as much as I love education as a concept, and as much as I love school as a concept, the education system in the US is incredibly awful for a number of reasons that I'm not even going to get into right now. But I have to remember that it has inflicted so much trauma onto my students. And when I do things, and this actually relates to some feedback and questions that I've gotten, when I give students choice about, you know, pick any reflection you want and do it, or, you know, pick any application you want and just have open dialogue, it can be a little jarring where, you know, I'm getting students asking, well, how much do I have to write? What format does it have to be in? It can be in any format you want. It can be as long as you want it to be. I want you to, whatever you hand in, I want it to be the best effort that you could put in at that time. I want you to hand in things that you are proud of, because at the end of the day, these assignments are a way, or at least my goal in having these assignments are for them to be a way for you to learn more. And to reflect about what you're learning, and, you know, to have these amazing discussions, and you know, unfortunately we can't be in person, so we can't have this dialogue, and so it's a little choppy and it's asynchronous, but it gives us more time to think about what we're saying and to type out longer responses. And so the reason that I don't say, you know, respond to a minimum of X amount of peers or submit a reflection that is a minimum of X amount of words is because I want it to be your choice. I want you to do the work that you are able to do. And, you know, that goes to, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? Like, we all have stuff going on at home. We're in shared spaces. We're taking a lot of classes. You know, some people are commuting, some people are not. Some people have a really hectic schedule. And so if there's a week that you can only give me a paragraph and it's a 5 sentence paragraph, but that's all that you had in you, I understand. And you shouldn't be docked because you had a hard week and could only submit a paragraph, right? Like, I shouldn't expect X amount of words from you every single time. Some weeks the material is really going to resonate with you and you're going to want to write a lot more or speak a lot more about it. And some weeks the material is going to be just not, you're not going to vibe with it, and that's fine. And so remembering that humanity, and not just remembering it, but centering that humanity of students in my courses is something that I have been working really hard on it and trying to figure out, you know, how do I balance, for example, grades, right? Like, this class is just pass fail, but how do I balance having to give grades versus not actually believing in them? And, you know, students wanting that B plus, because at the end of the day, GPA matters, right? Like, GPA matters for jobs, GPA matters for grad school. And me thinking, what's the difference between a B plus and an A at the end of the day, right? And how do I make sure that it's not just about amount of work or quality of work, because the quality of work and amount of work is going to look different for everyone. So, very long-winded response, but
I get what you're saying, and I just want to build real quick on, you know, what you're talking about, when students ask you about length and style and stuff, you know. So as you know, maybe your audience knows or doesn't know, I also teach Intro to Bio. I teach one section of that, and it's a class I love. I love teaching first year students. And I spend a considerable amount of energy in the first week or two just trying to disabuse them from this notion of, you know, I'm just going to come and kind of tell them how the world works. And I understand the temptation for them to expect that because they've been raised in an education system where you kind of mostly one-way traffic of information. And you're not kind of asked to really conceptualize the world through your own lens. And I would say that 18 is, it's unfortunate that 18 is perhaps the first time you're being asked to do that. But that is exactly what I'm going to ask you to do. Now, the other thing I do, I also um, I run a research program called Science Education and Society, so hence partially my interest in a course like this. I was raised in the STEM world, right? I was raised as a marine biologist. That's what I got my PhD in. So I know the STEM world well. I know its methods. I know its beauty. I know I enjoyed my time doing that. But I definitely had a call to Damascus or road to Damascus moment when I started teaching. I knew that that was going to be my calling. So in terms of the readings and being human in STEM, as somebody who studies science education for a living and who writes papers on that and funds programs on that, I am not even so much interested or that, I don't really pursue the science part per se. It's not that I don't care about science, I absolutely love it. But what you're speaking of, Professor, is education as a practice of freedom. If I had to had a phrase that encapsulated what you just described, that would be it. How do you kind of free the mind and free the mind to shape power in or recognize that they have power to shape their own futures and give them strategies to go on and do that. And when you think of education like that, that is not a content-driven exercise, right? That's not about physics or chem or bio. That's about critical consciousness of the world. That's about power. That's about agency, right? Now you can use the content to help cultivate those skills, right? But to me, both my teaching and my research is centered around questions about elevating the power that the humans, I believe, already have to places where they can see and use it, right? So, I think throughout the week, we're gonna look at a whole bunch of different kinds of articles, implicit bias, and all these sort of psychosocial historical things that help us understand the context of that power and why it was historically silenced, and what we can do to kind of change the narrative around that. But yeah, I mean, this is very personal for me, and as it is for you. So, looking forward to hearing more responses from them next week.
Yeah, super excited. And as a reminder, so next week, folks, you're going to be commenting on each other's applications. So I hope that that's a really fun activity because we'll get to see, we get to see all the sides of you because we get to read your reflections and your applications, but your peers and your colleagues, they'll get to see this other side of you. So have fun with it. My internet connection, man. But yeah, just have fun with it. Read your peers' applications, comment on them. What did you learn from them? How did they apply something that you wouldn't have thought of applying it that way? I mean, we already started seeing some of that in the discussions this week, and it was so beautiful to see. I was really excited reading those discussions.
Nice. Well, next week it is.
Next week.
Stay 6 feet up. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.